Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another legal breaking reporting video analysis update. The first one for the evening of Tuesday, January 6, 2026. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and enjoy for more legal breaking news that you know about. Let's get into our first legal breaking reporting video analysis update for the evening of January 6, Tuesday, 2026. Firstly, ladies and gentlemen, abortion remains legal. Let's get into the reporting. Abortion remains legal in the deep red state of Wyoming. Let's get into it, ladies and gentlemen.
Wyoming top court strikes down nation's first abortion pill ban by Ryan Mancini. Wyoming Supreme Court ruled Tuesday that abortion will remain legal in the state, undoing the country's first abortion pill ban enacted following the U.S. Supreme Court's 2022 repeal of Roe v. Wade. State justices in a 4-1 decision sided with Wellspring Health Access, the abortion access advocacy group Chelsea's Fund, and 4 women. They all argued that the anti-abortion law violated the state constitution and told the court that adults have the right to make their own healthcare decisions. The state justices looked at the Life is a Human Right Act of 2023, which prohibited abortions from being performed in Wyoming and explicitly banned the pill. 3 justices said the court has an independent role in deciding what test applies to determine whether the 2023 laws violate the state constitution, court filings read. Looking at prior cases in the language of Article 1, Section 38, the majority decided that a test called strict scrutiny applies in this case, the filings read. Under that test, the state must prove the 2023 abortion laws were written as narrowly as possible to achieve the state's interest in protecting prenatal life, that the abortion laws were the least burdensome way the state could achieve that goal, without unjustifiably restricting a woman's constitutional right to decide whether to terminate or continue a pregnancy. Wyoming Supreme Court Justice John Fenn concluded that the state failed to prove the 2023 laws were reasonable and necessary restrictions on the right to make one's own healthcare decisions. State attorneys argued abortion is not healthcare, and therefore banning it cannot violate Wyoming's state constitution, the Associated Press reported. The state court's decision came shortly before President Trump told House Republicans on Tuesday to be flexible with their demands to restrict federal funding going toward Obamacare-funded healthcare plans covering abortion. Lawmakers are negotiating for a potential deal to revive Obamacare subsidies that expired at the start of the new year. Top Republicans have fought to include new restrictions on federal funding for these health insurance-covered abortion services. Although the Hyde Amendment and other laws prevent federal funding going toward covering abortion, they do not prohibit plans through the Affordable Care Act from covering abortions so long as they are funded by state or private funding.
With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into our next reporting by The Hill, read to us by an automated voice. So we will be taking a look, a read, and a listen. Before we begin, ladies and gentlemen, I will reiterate, please like the reporting. If you did enjoy the reporting thus far, like, comment, share, as well as subscribe, and enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's get into it.
Bacon Miller Greenland seizure remarks really dumb by Sarah Fortinsky. Representative on Bacon, Republican from Nebraska, on Monday criticized White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller for musing about seizing Greenland, a semi-autonomous territory of Denmark. This is really dumb. Greenland and Denmark are our allies. There's no upside to demeaning our friends, but it is causing wounds that will take time to heal, Bacon wrote in a post on the social platform X. Bacon, one of 3 House Republicans whose district supported former Vice President Kamala Harris in 2024, was responding to a clip from a Monday interview on CNN's Delayed, in which the top White House aide reaffirmed that the formal position of the U.S. government is that Greenland should be part of the United States. The real question is, by what right does Denmark assert control over Greenland? What is the basis of their territorial claim? What is their basis of having Greenland as a colony of Denmark? Miller asked CNN's Jake Tapper, responding to a question about the potential for the U.S. to try to take over Greenland. The United States is the power of NATO. For the United States to secure the Arctic region to protect and defend NATO and NATO interests, obviously, Greenland should be part of the United States, Miller continued. And so that is a conversation that we are going to have as a country. After U.S. forces carried out a covert operation on Saturday to capture and arrest Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, President Trump levied new threats against a number of other countries, including Greenland. The comments have prompted stern condemnations from the leaders of Denmark and Greenland. I believe one should take the American president seriously when he says that he wants Greenland, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said in an interview with local broadcaster TV2, according to a translation from Bloomberg. But I will also make it clear that if the U.S. chooses to attack another NATO country militarily, then everything stops, including NATO, and thus the security that has been established since the end of the Second World War, she added. Miller brushed off questions about the potential for military action against Greenland, which is under NATO's protection by virtue of being part of Denmark, but did not back down from assertions the territory should be under U.S. control. The United States should have Greenland as part of the United States. There's no need to even think or talk about this in the context that you are asking of a military operation, Miller told Tapper. Nobody's going to fight the United States militarily over the future of Greenland. Bacon has frequently broken with Trump on issues of foreign policy. He announced in June that he plans to retire at the end of this term.
With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into our next reporting, read by the New York Times to us by an automated voice. So we will be taking a look, a read, as well as a listen. Before we begin, ladies and gentlemen, I'll reiterate again, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and enjoy for more legal breaking news that you need to know about and more on the side of politics.
Maduro is the latest high-profile client for his lawyer, Barry Pollock. This article is by Santul Nurkar and read by an automated voice. Barry J. Pollock, a lawyer representing Nicolas Maduro, the Venezuelan leader captured on Saturday in an audacious U.S. military raid on his country's capital, is accustomed to finding innovative ways to defend clients. A seasoned trial lawyer, Mr. Pollock, 61, has had prominent clients involved in complicated international cases, including Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, who was accused by U.S. authorities of illegally disseminating information related to national security. In 2024, Mr. Assange, an Australian national, was released after Mr. Pollock negotiated a deal with the Justice Department in which his client would plead guilty outside the continental United States to a single felony count of illegally obtaining and disclosing national security material. Mr. Assange's ensuing guilty plea in the U.S. territory of the Northern Mariana Islands in the Western Pacific ended nearly 14 years of legal wrangling over his fate, during much of which he took refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Mr. Pollock also won the acquittal of Michael Krautz, the former senior accounting director of the broadband unit of Enron, the Houston-based energy giant that in 2001 became synonymous with corporate malfeasance. Mr. Krautz had been accused of fraudulently overselling the company's services. In 2007, Mr. Pollock secured the freedom of Martin Tankleff, a Long Island man who had served 17 years in prison after being wrongfully convicted of killing his parents. John May, a lawyer who represented General Manuel Noriega, the Panamanian leader captured by U.S. forces in 1989 and convicted in Miami, in a case that has drawn parallels with that of Mr. Maduro, said that the captured Venezuelan leader could not be in better hands than those of Mr. Pollock. That, Mr. May cautioned, that did not mean Mr. Pollock has the resources necessary to defend him. But Mr. Maduro certainly has a lawyer who will figure it out if it can be figured out, Mr. May said. Mr. Pollock earned his law degree from Georgetown University in 1991, according to the biography page from his law firm, Harris St. Laurent and Weschler, which has offices in Washington and New York. He then clerked for Judge Thomas A. Flannery of Federal District Court in Washington. An adjunct professor at Georgetown University's law school, Mr. Pollock teaches a course called Anatomy of a Federal Criminal Trial, focusing on the Enron case. Last semester, he taught the course alongside Jonathan Lopez, the former federal prosecutor who argued the case against Mr. Krautz, the former Enron executive. Kirsten Noyes contributed research, and Carol Rosenberg contributed reporting.
With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into our next reporting and video analysis update for the evening, read by the LA Times. Before we begin, ladies and gentlemen, please like, comment, share, subscribe, as well as enjoy. And as well as please share and much more. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen,
This January 6th plaque was made to honor law enforcement. It's nowhere to be found at the Capitol. By Lisa Mascaro. This article is read by an automated voice. Washington. Approaching the 5th anniversary of the January 6, 2021, attack on the Capitol, the official plaque honoring the police who defended democracy that day is nowhere to be found. It's not on display at the Capitol, as is required by law. Its whereabouts aren't publicly known, though it's believed to be in storage. House Speaker Mike Johnson, a Louisiana Republican, has yet to formally unveil the plaque, and the Trump administration's Department of Justice is seeking to dismiss a police officer's lawsuit, asking that it be displayed as intended. The architect of the Capitol, which was responsible for obtaining and displaying the plaque, said in light of the federal litigation, it cannot comment. Determined to preserve the nation's history, some 100 members of Congress, mostly Democrats, have taken it upon themselves to memorialize the moment. For months, They've mounted poster board-style replicas of the January 6th plaque outside their office doors, resulting in a Capitol complex awash with makeshift remembrances. On behalf of a grateful Congress, this plaque honors the extraordinary individuals who bravely protected and defended this symbol of democracy on January 6, 2021, reads the faux bronze stand-in for the real thing. Their heroism will never be forgotten. January 6th, void in the Capitol. In Washington, a capital city lined with monuments to the nation's history, the plaque was intended to become a simple but permanent marker, situated near the Capitol's west front, where some of the most violent fighting took place as rioters breached the building. But in its absence, the missing plaque makes way for something else entirely, a culture of forgetting. Visitors can pass through the Capitol without any formal reminder of what happened that day, when a mob of President Trump supporters stormed the building trying to overturn the Republicans' 2020 re-election defeat to Democrat Joe Biden. With memory left unchecked, it allows new narratives to swirl and revised histories to take hold. 5 years ago, the jarring scene watched the world over was declared an insurrection by the then GOP leader of the Senate, while the House GOP leader at the time called it his saddest day in Congress. But those condemnations have faded. Trump calls it a day of love. And Johnson, who was among those lawmakers challenging the 2020 election results, is now the House Speaker. The question of January 6th remains: democracy was on the guillotine. How important is that event in the overall sweep of 21st century U.S. history? Said Douglas Brinkley, a professor of history at Rice University and noted scholar. Will January 6th be seen as the seminal moment when democracy was in peril? He asked. Or will it be remembered as kind of a weird one-off? There's not as much consensus on that as one would have thought on the 5th anniversary, he said. Memories shift, but violent legacy lingers. At least 5 people died in the riot and its aftermath, including Trump supporter Ashley Babbitt, who was fatally shot by police while trying to climb through a window toward the House chamber. More than 140 law enforcement officers were wounded, some gravely, and several died later, some by suicide. All told, some 1,500 people were charged in the Capitol attack, among the largest federal prosecutions in the nation's history. When Trump returned to power in January 2025, he pardoned all of them within hours of taking office. Unlike the twin light beams that commemorated the September 11, 2001, attack or the standalone chairs at the Oklahoma City bombing site memorial, the failure to recognize January 6th has left a gap not only in memory, but in helping to stitch the country back together. That's why you put up a plaque, said Representative Mary Gay Scanlon, DPA. You respect the memory and the service of the people involved. Justice seeks to dismiss lawsuit. The Speaker's office over the years has suggested it was working on installing the plaque, but it declined to respond to a request for further comment. Lawmakers approved the plaque in March 2022 as part of a broader government funding package. The resolution said the U.S. owes its deepest gratitude to those officers, and it set out instructions for an honorific plaque listing the names of officers who responded to the violence that occurred. It gave a 1-year deadline for installation at the Capitol. This summer, 2 officers who fought the mob that day sued over the delay. By refusing to follow the law and honor officers as it is required to do, Congress encourages this rewriting of history, said the claim by officers Harry Dunn and Daniel Hodges. It suggests that the officers are not worthy of being recognized, because Congress refuses to recognize them. The Justice Department is seeking to have the case dismissed. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro and others argued Congress already has publicly recognized the service of law enforcement personnel by approving the plaque and displaying it wouldn't alleviate the problems they claim to face from their work. It is implausible, the Justice Department attorneys wrote, to suggest installation of the plaque would stop the alleged death threats they claim to have been receiving. The department also said the plaque is required to include the names of all law enforcement officers involved in the response that day, some 3,600 people. Makeshift memorials emerge. Lawmakers who've installed replicas of the plaque outside their offices said it's important for the public to know what happened. There are new generations of people who are just growing up now who don't understand how close we came to losing our democracy on January 6, 2021. Said Representative Jamie Raskin, DMD, a member of the January 6th committee, which was opposed by GOP leadership, but nevertheless issued a nearly 1,000-page report investigating the run-up to the attack and the attempt to overturn the 2020 election. Raskin envisions the Capitol one day holding tours around what happened. People need to study that as an essential part of American history, he said. Think about the dates in American history that we know only by the dates. There's the 4th of July. There's December 7th. There's 9/11. And there's January 6th, said Representative Zoe Lofgren, D. San Jose, who also served on the committee and has a plaque outside her office. They really saved my life, and they saved the democracy, and they deserve to be thanked for it, she said. But as time passes, there are no longer bipartisan memorial services for January 6th. On Tuesday, the Democrats will reconvene members from the January 6th committee for a hearing to examine ongoing threats to free and fair elections, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries of New York announced. It's unlikely Republicans will participate. The Republicans under Johnson have tapped Representative Barry Loudermilk of Georgia to stand up their own special committee to uncover what the Speaker calls the full truth of what happened. They're planning a hearing this month. We should stop this silliness of trying to whitewash history. It's not going to happen, said Representative Joe Morrill, D.N.Y., who helped lead the effort to display the replica plaques. I was here that day, so I'll never forget, he said. I think that Americans will not forget what happened. The number of makeshift plaques that fill the halls is a testimony to that remembrance, he said. Instead of one plaque, he said, they've now got 100. Mascaro writes for the Associated Press. Thanks for listening to this story, brought to you by the Los Angeles Times.
With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for that reporting and video analysis update. Before we begin, ladies and gentlemen, with our next reporting and video analysis update, which will be our second to last reporting for this. First reporting for the evening of January 6th, Tuesday, 2026. We had a discussion, a colleague and I, about the unfortunate, devastating event that led up to the Capitol attack, which was incited by Trump himself. And honestly, ladies and gentlemen, I, as well as a bunch of other independent media news reporters, agree and are on the same page, at least the left-wing blue guy supporters are, rather than the Republicans, of course, agree that that Trump was the one who incited and caused the Capitol insurrection in 2021, January 6th, which is illegal, and yes, it is true he would have gone to prison because, as Jack Smith outlined in his deposition hearing to Congress, that Donald Trump would have been convicted had it not been for this illegal election of him, and sent to prison for the rest of his life, which is where he should be right now if it weren't for this illegal and unconstitutional election. And he would have been not only facing his federal election interference case, but he would also still be facing the Georgia State RICO prosecution case. if it had not been for this illegal and unconstitutional election. It is illegal and unconstitutional, ladies and gentlemen, because he is the one who caused the insurrection. Therefore, he is an adjudicated oath-breaking insurrectionist and constitutional oath violator. Let's get, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, into our next reporting by the New York Times. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, please like, comment, share, as well as subscribe and enjoy, ladies and gentlemen. Please, if you would like to support my work, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, and much more. It's completely free of charge. There's no paywall, no nothing.
Justice Department drops claim that Venezuela's Cartel de los Soles is an actual group. This article is by Charlie Savage and read by an automated voice. Follow live updates on the U.S. involvement in Venezuela after Maduro's ouster. The Justice Department has backed off a dubious claim about President Nicolas Maduro that the Trump administration promoted last year in laying the groundwork to remove him from power in Venezuela, accusing him of leading a drug cartel called Cartel de los Soles. That claim traces back to a 2020 grand jury indictment of Mr. Maduro drafted by the Justice Department. In July 2025, copying language from it, the Treasury Department designated Cartel de los Soles as a terrorist organization. In November, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State and President Trump's national security advisor, ordered the State Department to do the same. But experts in Latin American crime and narcotics issues have said it is actually a slang term invented by the Venezuelan media in the 1990s for officials who are corrupted by drug money. And on Saturday, after the administration captured Mr. Maduro, the Justice Department released a rewritten indictment that appeared to tacitly concede the point. Prosecutors still accused Mr. Maduro of participating in a drug trafficking conspiracy, but they abandoned the claim that Cartel de los Soles was an actual organization. Instead, the revised indictment states that it refers to a patronage system and a culture of corruption fueled by drug money. Where the old indictment refers 32 times to Cartel de los Soles and describes Mr. Maduro as its leader, the new one mentions it twice and says that he, like his predecessor, President Hugo Chavez, participated in, perpetuated, and protected this patronage system. Profits from drug trafficking and the protection of drug trafficking partners flow to corrupt rank-and-file civilian, military, and intelligence officials who operate in a patronage system run by those at the top, referred to as the Cartel de los Soles or Cartel of the Suns, a reference to the sun insignia affixed to the uniforms of high-ranking Venezuelan military officials, the new indictment said. The retreat calls into greater question the legitimacy of the Trump administration's designation of Cartel de los Soles as a foreign terrorist organization last year. Spokespeople at the White House and the Justice, State, and Treasury Departments did not respond to requests for comment. Elizabeth Dickinson, the Deputy Director for Latin America at the International Crisis Group, said the new indictment's portrayal of Cartel de los Soles was exactly accurate to reality, unlike the 2020 iteration. I think the new indictment gets it right, but the designations are still far from reality, she said. Designations don't have to be proved in court, and that's the difference. Clearly, they knew they could not prove it in court. Still, Mr. Rubio again referred to Cartel de los Soles as an actual cartel in an interview on NBC's Meet the Press on Sunday, a day after the revised indictment was unsealed. We will continue to reserve the right to take strikes against drug boats that are bringing drugs toward the United States that are being operated by transnational criminal organizations, including the Cartel de los Soles, he said. Of course, their leader, the leader of that cartel, is now in U.S. custody and facing U.S. justice in the Southern District of New York, and that's Nicolas Maduro. The Drug Enforcement Administration's annual National Drug Threat Assessment, which details major trafficking organizations, has never mentioned Cartel de los Soles, nor has the annual World Drug Report by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. but the 2020 indictment, which laid out a lengthy narrative about a years-long conspiracy, portrayed Cartel de los Soles as a drug trafficking organization, led by Mr. Maduro. It said the group took actions like providing weapons to the FARC, a Marxist rebel group in Colombia that has funded its militant activities by drug trafficking and trying to flood the United States with cocaine as a weapon. The drafting of the 2020 indictment was overseen by Emile Bove III, then a Terrorism and International Narcotics Unit prosecutor in New York. Mr. Bove ran the Justice Department in the opening months of the second Trump administration and had a turbulent tenure, which included firing dozens of officials and ordering the dismissal of bribery charges against Eric Adams, then the mayor of New York. Mr. Trump later appointed Mr. Bove to a lifetime position on a federal appeals court. While the experts in Latin American crime and narcotics issues praised the corrective about Cartel de los Soles, some also criticized other aspects of the revised indictment. For example, the indictment added as a defendant and a supposed co-conspirator with Mr. Maduro, the head of a Venezuelan prison gang called Tren de Aragua. The connection described in the indictment is thin. It says only that the gang leader, in phone calls in 2019 with someone he thought was a Venezuelan official, offered escort services to protect drug shipments passing through Venezuela. Last year, Mr. Trump declared that Mr. Maduro was directing the activities of Tren de Aragua, even though the U.S. intelligence community believes the opposite is true. Jeremy McDermott, a co-founder of Insight Crime, a Latin America crime and security think tank, said the inclusion of the Tren de Aragua leader as an accused co-conspirator with Mr. Maduro in a drug trafficking conspiracy reflects President Trump's rhetoric, but was misleading. He pointed to his think tank's analysis of Tren de Aragua that says the gang has no ownership of major cocaine shipments.
With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for our second to last, but not least, legal breaking reporting video analysis update, ladies and gentlemen. I believe since we just got that report, that they are now going to not consider him the leader, I suppose. And I suspect, ladies and gentlemen, that maybe the judge might dismiss the narco-terrorism charge. One of them, anyway, that Nicolas Maduro is illegally facing. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into our next reporting by the New York Times. The last one.
Appeals court upholds prohibition.
The last one for the evening of Tuesday, January 6, 2026.
Court upholds prohibition on Trump's medical research cuts. This article is by Zach Montague and read by an automated voice. A federal appeals court ruled on Monday that the Trump administration could not make drastic cuts to the federal funding supporting much of the country's medical and scientific research, reaffirming a lower court's ruling from early last year. In a unanimous decision, a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit found that one of the Trump administration's earliest attempts to kneecap universities, through proposed reductions to grants from the National Institutes of Health, was unlawful. The proposal brought an outpouring of opposition from hundreds of universities and hospitals, which warned that the cuts could cost them billions and make it impossible to continue studies in areas like cancer, genetics, and infectious disease. The sharp cuts took aim at the pre-negotiated rates in thousands of federal grants that set aside money for overhead costs in medical research, such as facility upkeep, laboratory technology, and support staff. Scores of universities and hospitals affected by the cuts said the funding for those indirect costs was often shared, with a single grant helping cover the costs of multiple laboratories and experiments simultaneously. That meant that a loss of funds could threaten not just research directly covered by the grants, but a broad range of other work. In an announcement in February, the Trump administration proposed capping the money that could be allocated for overhead costs to 15% of any given grant, while the rates previously agreed upon often surpass 30 or 40%. In an opinion explaining Monday's decision, Judge Kermit V. LePay, a Clinton appointee, wrote that lawmakers had laid out a carefully circumscribed procedure that controls any deviation from agreed-upon funding rates in federal grants. Congress went to great lengths to ensure that NIH could not displace negotiated indirect cost reimbursement rates with a uniform rate, he wrote. Judge LePay noted President Trump's attempt in his first term to similarly cap reimbursement of overhead costs at 10% in a budget proposal in 2017. Congress rejected the proposal. The possibility of such a sudden funding cut raised deep concern in the medical research community that a considerable number of facilities across the country might shutter, causing permanent losses in advanced research. 3 separate coalitions of universities, medical organizations, and Democratic-led states filed suit in February, arguing that the possible setbacks to research institutions in their states could be insurmountable, and that many institutions lack the financial reserves to cover the shortfall. A New York Times analysis of NIH grant data estimated that $9 billion of $32 billion, or more than 25% of grant dollars distributed in fiscal year 2024, had been set aside to cover overhead costs. In court, and in dozens of sworn declarations, the groups suing documented a hefty list of possible consequences on both individual experiments and public health more generally. Those included paused clinical trials on new drugs and the loss of veterinary technicians who oversee animal research. In April, Judge Angel Kelly of the Federal District Court in Massachusetts permanently barred the Trump administration from capping the funding, and the proposal remained stalled throughout last year.
With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for this first legal breaking reporting video analysis update for the evening of multiple reportings that was in this first legal breaking reporting video analysis update for the evening of Tuesday, January 6, 2026. Again, ladies and gentlemen, please do not forget history, and please do not believe a damn thing that Donald Trump says, because what he says happened really didn't happen. He is the one who caused the January 6, 2021 Capitol insurrection. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay positive, and I will look forward to talking to you guys in my next legal breaking reporting video analysis update.